king, an odd name for a slave perchance, but he was a good man. It was later that I realized that the Negro, as we call them, were just as capable of being educated as any white child. I did not think this possible, as most of my contemporaries did not. We thought they had to be taken care of. They were incapable of taking care of themselves, and this was completely wrong. And all it took was being shown that, and I recognized, perchance one of the few real talents that I had, that to recognize when I was wrong, and to change what I was doing. And so I became an abolitionist. I was one of the founders of the abolitionist movement in Pennsylvania, striving to end slavery in all of its forms. As you remember that slavery was not just the importation of slaves, but also the selling of them and the keeping of their children as slaves. It was quite a complex system. And really during the Declaration and the Constitution Conventions, when we were talking about slavery, really the issue that caused such a division of the Deep South was that if the law had passed as written, it would have prevented new importation of slaves, but not the ending of slavery or selling of slaves. And the Virginias and the central states that had slavery would have a corner on the market and would be able to sell the slaves at an inflated rate to the Deep South that needed them. So that was one of the major objections. It was not purely drawn on the morality of slavery, but rather on the merchanting of slavery. But as it was, we passed the entire kit and caboodle down to the new generation and let them, in about 20-some-odd years, tear each other apart in your civil war. It is a crime that parents give to their children their worst offenses.
Do you think, you're here now and you know about the Civil War, do you think you saw it coming?
We knew that there would be bloodshed. There was bloodshed over the Constitution, whether or not it should be accepted. So something as vital and as largely inculcated into our culture as slavery certainly could not be removed without blood. Anywhere you could take a nail shard or something through an arm and pull it out without blood and ruin of the wound. We didn't know how to handle it. We didn't know how to cure it. We just knew that we had to start. And fortunately, it left our children very bloody.
Tell me a few of your inventions and which ones you really like the most.
Personally, the most pleasing invention to my own ears was the harmonica, the glass harmonica, the turning tuned bowls that spun on an iron rod, and you could play melodies and chords with your fingertips. Mozart and Beethoven, I believe, wrote music for it. Later on, Tchaikovsky wrote a part of his Nutcracker suite for the harmonica. Marie Antoinette played one, and they were quite popular for a long time. And as I understanding is that there are musicians today that still play the instrument. It's most pleasing, most celestial. I played it once for Deborah, my wife, when she was asleep, and she woke up and thought, she said that she had died and gone to heaven, was listening to the music of the heavens. It was a very, very pleasant compliment. So personally, that was my favorite. But actually, of course, I think the lightning rod was probably the most good to humanity. That it was placed on buildings the world around, as far away as China, so I heard. And we helped change the idea of humanity for what their place was in the cosmology. They no longer felt themselves subject to the whims of the heavens, and that lightning was then a punishment from the gods, but rather simply an act of nature, like rain. And if you could put a roof over your head to keep off the rain and snow and sleet, then you could put a lightning rod on the roof and help protect yourself from the stroke of lightning. It was just an act of nature. And many other things, the reaching grip, extended arm, mapping the Gulf Stream, bifocals, a flexible catheter I created for my brother so he could be eased of his illness. There are many such enlightenments that I was able to bring forth, and many times they were simply innovations over already invented items. But it was the Franklin stove, of course, all of which I never took out a patent on. I didn't want to benefit from that which I felt would be such a great gift to the common civilization that I lived in. I got so much out of their benefits to me that I felt it was the least I could do to grant that something back to them for their ease.
Do you think this humanist view came from your fathers and grandfathers? And I mean, it had to have come from somewhere. Or
I'm sorry, which?
Your humanist views and giving back.
My father was they lived through the religious persecution of England, and matter of fact, which coaxed my father to flee and come over to Americas in the late 1600s. But really, it was just my father's fairness in general, and my experience with Pennsylvania at the time, in Philadelphia, which was based on religious tolerance. All of the Pennsylvania lands were. That's what William Penn had put forth, that let us have a land where people can worship their own way, not have one overriding government. We have enough of that from Old England. And also my reading of Locke and Hume and other humanist writers, other writers of the Enlightenment, who really held forth that mankind could decide for itself what was moral.
You seem to, even though you only had a few years of education, your wisdom has been seen for centuries. Why was there only printer on your tombstone?
It was really a defining trait.
Rephrase the
Okay.
question.
It is true that on my marker that I had made for my grave, that it just says Benjamin Franklin, printer, and then Deborah Franklin, my wife, who I'm interred with. And yes, there were many things that I enjoyed and did. It was ambassador, inventor, statesman, scientist, philosopher, researcher, arborist, horticulturalist, herbologist. These things are true, astronomer, etc. But really, printing is what I did. It's what made me. It's what I got my honest living from. And it's what backed me in enabling me to be able to search those other disciplines. And I was always, I think, a leather apron man. I stood before 5 kings. I was known throughout most of the civilized world. But I was a workman. I was not an aristocracy. I was an American. And an honest trade is all the more epitaph I need.
What about today? You've seen our world a little bit. Do you think you'd fit in?
I would hope so. I'm hoping. I think I would fit in today in your world somewhat. I think there's always a place. I'm hoping for a man who's not afraid of hard work and who's willing to do good work for his fellow creature. Of course, some of your technologies far outstrip my own. I wouldn't even begin to know how to harness the electricity that you have, that I helped define something of, but I certainly wouldn't know how to work it. But I think I'm a quick learner. I read well. And so if you have a job for me, please do let me know, since I seem to be brought up now. And maybe people will get tired of listening to me talk about myself. But as a philosopher, as a statesman, I don't know. The world moves so quickly now. I don't know if the pace that I'm used to would match, but I would certainly give it a try.
What to you is American character?
The American character is not defined by our borders. It's not just who was born here. For indeed, most of us, or we're all immigrants, and we came from diverse cultures, backgrounds, religions. I think in America we were able to start over and create our own breed, our own kind. And it's not exclusive. I do not understand the desire to limit America to just Americans. America, to me, is bringing together the differences and building them together into a common strength, where hard work, where intensive labor for a common cause is good, where helping your neighbor is part of the ethic, where looking out for each other, spreading out common knowledge and common wisdom, helping things spread someone else's idea as much as your own, giving to the common community. I think your open source code is a good element of example of that. That one person improves it and gives it back to the collective to be able to then spread out and improve. I think it's a marvelous idea. It's not all about how much can you reap, and it's not certainly about creating the wealth of nations and giving it to a single person. I do not understand that aspect of your time where one person who controls an empire of business can literally own more than nations. That is a frightening concept. For if we were angels, we would not need governments. And we need governments. And I don't think that anyone with that much power, any single person, could possibly be trusted with it.
You were a can-do kind of person. Can't? Tell me about can't.
I should tell you about can't. I don't like the word. It just means that you can't do it yet, or it's not been tried yet, or don't have the right solution yet. I find it frustrating in your times, for example, when your automakers say, we can't